I'm not a writer, I'm not a historian, I'm an engineer. What motivated me to write this book is that when I read about Donagracia, I was infatuated by her. I have never been able to compare her equally to anybody I ever knew, from all the books we read, from the Torah, from the religious books. I've never seen any person like her. When I started comparing her with great women in the past, with Sarah, with Esther, with all the biblical characters, they did great things. But what she did for a co-religionist is, I find, much more. I forgot about women. I decided to look at the whole world, humanity. Who has ever done, which person has ever done something as important as her? And I came across, of course, Martin Luther King. He worked very hard for people of his own race, and he helped them, he sacrificed his life for them. So he's a great man, I respect him highly. He's done a fantastic job. There is even Martin Luther King Day in America, so it's been very important for the dignity of black people. Donagracia has done this to her own people. She tried to save the lives of people from the Inquisition. She sacrificed her life also, like Martin Luther King. She did two extra things which Martin Luther King didn't do. First thing, she was a very rich lady. She was a banker, and all the kings and emperors needed bankers at the time. She was one of the biggest bankers in Europe. Today, perhaps you could compare them difficultly with much bigger than Rothschilds, bigger than perhaps Rockefeller, I don't know. There was one of the biggest bankers in the world. So all the emperors and kings needed her money whenever they wanted to do something extra. So she was welcome in all the palaces. She could live a life of luxury, unimaginable luxury that no other person could live. She sacrificed that. Martin Luther didn't have this opportunity. Second thing, she used her own money. Luther used the community money to make all the meetings, all the work that he's led. So Donagracia, on these two accounts, has done what Martin Luther King has done, even with two additional very important things. So, of course, she's not recognized. She's not known well enough. The world didn't recognize her well enough. In fact, Israel, with Shimon Peres, only recognized her as being the first person who not only dreamt, even bought a land where she tried to assemble all her co-religionists in a land where they could rule their own selves. Donagracia had in her the ideal of saving people from the Inquisition. And ultimately, the safest land in the whole world on the 16th century was the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire was a land where people were free to pray the way they want. They could express their religious feelings freely, openly. So this was unthinkable in the Catholic world of the 16th century, where many were converted. The ones that remained Jews were either in ghettos or were oppressed very much. In the Ottoman Empire, the minorities paid a small tax called jizya. And once they paid that tax, the emperor, the Ottoman emperor, was obliged, it was an option for him, he was obliged to protect them, to give them all the liberties he promised. And these liberties always remained intact in the Ottoman Empire. Particularly during the 5 most important emperors of the Ottoman Empire, these liberties were expressed to the limit. Of course, this was a dream for oppressed people in the West, in Europe. And Donagracia was their leader, their dream leader. She was a dreamer that always imagined a land where they would be able to protect themselves freely and live freely. Of course, Jerusalem was her highest, biggest dream. Like it has always been the dream of Jews, one day to go back to Jerusalem. And of course, the reason for that is that after the expulsion, for 3,000 years, Jews have been erring all over the world and have been used like the golden calf. They've been always in every crisis, be it an economic crisis or a health problem, an epidemic. Immediately the Jews will be shown as the reason for that epidemic or for the economic crisis. And so Jews have been pushed around for thousands of years after the expulsion. So the dream is to go back to the old days when Jews could live freely and protect themselves with their arms in their hands, rather than give their protection to somebody else who would abuse it eventually. So she had this dream, and of course the Ottoman Empire housed the four most important religious sites in the world. These are Jerusalem, Hebron, Safed, and Tiberias. She wanted, of course, she dreamt about Jerusalem, but if she asked for Jerusalem from Suleiman the Magnificent, he would immediately think that these people have an eye on my land, and this would not go well with the emperor. So she opted, of course, for the second. Hebron is inside Jerusalem and it's too small to harbor all the people suffering in Europe. Then Safed, already there was an Ottoman force in Safed, so it wouldn't be proper to ask for Safed. Tiberias remained only. So what she did, she spoke with Suleiman the Magnificent, told her about her worries, about her concerns, and said that she wants to bring all the people suffering in Europe to Tiberias. They made an agreement. She agreed to pay certain sums of money, and against these sums of money, there will be an independent, semi-dependent state in Tiberias. They worked very hard with Joseph Nassi to build the walls around Tiberias. They spent a lot of money, and there were a lot of fights going on, because many people spread the word that if there is a Jewish kingdom in Tiberias, the Islam faith will suffer heavily. So the Muslim workers that were working on the wall refused to work. And this was brought to the attention of the emperor, Suleiman I, and he sent orders immediately to restore people to continue to work. The governor of the land came and hanged two of the workers that refused to work. Immediately everybody started to work, and today you see the walls of Tiberias. If you've been there, you will see a fantastic wall that was constructed with the efforts of Donagracia and Joseph Nassi. Joseph Nassi became such an important character in the Ottoman Empire that the decision of conquering Cyprus was his idea. He is the one that explained that it was important to conquer Cyprus. Sokullu Mehmet, who was the son-in-law of the emperor, who was also the prime minister, the Sadr Azam. Prime minister at that time had all the rights of the emperor, and he had the seal, so he could all the laws could come out through him. He could do anything he wanted. Although he was so powerful, Sokullu was one of the most important prime ministers in Ottoman history. What Joseph Nassi said always was considered more than Sokullu. For example, conquering Cyprus was Joseph Nassi's idea. He was backed by Piyale Pasha, Lala Mustafa Pasha, even Ebu Suud Efendi, the chief religious person in the country, supported Joseph Nassi. So, in spite of Sokullu's objections, Cyprus was conquered and taken. This is the reason why still Cyprus is partly Turkish. It's because of Joseph Nassi. They're amazing characters. I mean, I really, the more I learn about them, the more, as I was writing, of course, I got more and more information, and it's an unending well, and it's part of Ottoman history. I think it's part of world history. And in my books, you travel through the 16th century Europe, which is also a fascinating part. I think it's the most important history the most important period in world history. This century is really where everything happened. What happened? America was discovered in the 16th century. The trade routes changed completely, which created Europe in a way. The third thing, Renaissance took place in the 16th century. Reformation in religion took place in the 16th century. Also, the press was discovered in the 16th century. That was already, it made a huge change. Imagine, there were no newspapers. There were no musical books. Books were written by hand, and it was very expensive, so musicians couldn't buy them easily. Reformation couldn't be without the press, because the information couldn't be distributed so much. New ideas, Lutheran ideas wouldn't be distributed so easily. So this is a fascinating century. And going through my books, you are really traveling through the 16th century. Although our principal characters, Donagracia and Joseph, are taking you through that century, you are really experiencing how life from her mouth developed in these periods. Also, historically, on the 16th century, you had two very, very important emperors. One of them was Charles V, the other one was Suleiman the Magnificent. These were the most powerful people in the world. They were the ones that held the largest amount of land in the world on the 16th century. So you see also the power struggle between them. She was a banker. Bankers were very important. So emperors and kings always needed money. They didn't have a budget. They didn't have this budgetary concept yet. So they would just spend and spend until suddenly somebody will tell them, I'm sorry, we don't have enough money to go to war or to, build an army. So he would say, go to the bankers. So they had to get on very well with the bankers. Today the bankers are important perhaps in the world, but at that time they were determinant because there were not too many of them that could land on the levels of emperors and kings. And there were really three bankers which are important to mention. One of them is the Fuggers, the Habsburgs bankers, the bankers of the Holy Roman Emperor. Donagracia, Mendes House, also Affiatati, the Italians. Also Wesley's also on a more minor scale, I think. So you had these three, you have a very operatic scene where you have two emperors, three bankers, and that's Europe for you nearly. This is where the powerhouse is. So it's really fascinating century, which really always intrigues me very much. And in my book, I'm really concentrating on the 16th century. I've translated, I tried to have my book translated. I worked with a few translators, and I couldn't maintain the soul of the book. The book has been very popular in Turkey. It has been read very widely. 25,000 people read the book in Turkey. It's my first book. And normally, what I hear in the States is that if your first book sells 1,000, it's a miracle. So I think people found something in the book, something historical information, which is really given in a taste of Dan Brown's book, let's say. So it was easy to read, but there's a lot of information which is well researched. It has its own foundations in history. As I went more and more into this part of the history, I discovered many more things which I generously use in my books. And I think I had it translated, as I said, I couldn't find a good translator that will keep the soul of the book, so I made the translation myself. And then I sent it to my editor in Berkeley, in California, in my old school. And she's, I think, doing a very meticulous job with it. I expect very soon to receive the edited book. I already had discussions with publishers, distributors in the States. Also, I'm planning PR work also to get people to know a little bit more about my work. And I hope by the end of this year to be able to be published in the United States, and I hope it will be also received as well as it has been received in Turkey. Of course, it will first be published in all the English-speaking languages: England, Australia, New Zealand, the United States, of course. Also, an ambassador friend of mine is translating my book, who knows very well Turkish and Hebrew. He's translating into Hebrew, Moshe Kamhi, and he will. So we'll have the Hebrew version soon, I hope, at hand. Eventually, it will be translated into Spanish, Portuguese, and I hope this part of history will be even better known with my novels. I also have a history book that I will publish, which I think also will be a reference book. There are some very good history books around, but this one also I think will find its place next to these books. And my novels also, I think, will be the only novels about these people that are really very easy to read and very enjoyable. Of course, there is the French novel written by Catherine, her family name. Really, it's a beautiful novel. I read it. I really enjoy reading it very much. But my novels are easier to read, and as I said, in Dan Brown style. So when you read it, you really enjoy it. One complaint, my friends, is that I bought the book and read it in 1 day. In 2 days, I finished reading the book. So it really flows when you read it. I hope I'll be able to maintain the same flow in English also. Donagracia is the most important link between Turkey and the Ottoman and Portugal. I was with a culture minister, Portuguese culture minister, together with thinking. She asked me a question. She said, what is the most important link between the two countries? And I told her about Donagracia's story. She said, that's amazing. We have to work on that. And I said, what can we do? Of course, I said, in Istanbul, there is a synagogue in Asküe which she built. There is a synagogue called La Señora in Izmir. There's a Portuguese synagogue in Izmir, which was the biggest synagogue of the time, meaning that there was a very big Portuguese community in Izmir at that time. So she was very interested. She asked the Portuguese ambassador in Ankara to work on this project, and we went together to the Turkish Minister of Culture. We explained the importance of the connection between Turkey and Portugal of Donagracia, and we came to the conclusion that it will be very good to make an exposition that will start in Portugal, travel to all the places that Donagracia traveled, and make it a peace exposition. So we start from Portugal, go to England, London, then go to Antwerp, from Antwerp go to Venice, from Venice come to Selanika Pass, come to Istanbul, of course, then from Istanbul go to Tiberias. And this will also be a cultural dialogue, let's say, between all these countries because of Donagracia. The project was seen positively by both ministers. An MOU was signed between Portugal and Turkey to realize this project. But unfortunately, 16th century Ottoman language is so confusing, so difficult, very few people in Turkey can read. So the decision was that both countries will choose 5 professors that will research the subject, create enough material. Every country will pay for its own work, and then all this work will be brought together, and then the exposition will take place in Lisbon. Unfortunately, it was very difficult in Turkey to find 5 professors that are versed well enough in 16th century Ottoman language that could bring up material from the archives and make this project possible. We got stuck there. I didn't give up. I spoke with our present Minister of Culture also. When, of course, these cultural things are important when there's a very peaceful environment in the countries. So I hope this will happen soon, and whenever there's an opportunity, I'd like to do that. Also, my other dream is to make the Donagracia synagogue in Hasköy, that is in shambles, that is in ruins, to make a museum of Donagracia there, and so her name will be remembered forever and ever. The books I wrote them in Turkish because there was nothing written in Turkish on them, so I consider them to be a monument. My books are a monument in Turkish, in Turkey, about Donagracia English.